Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company. I'm Pete Gruber,
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning to welcome to the Gruber Morning Show.
and we've got a cool new background again today, and we've been playing with this. This is artificial intelligence. You put in a certain prompt, and we asked it again for a new studio in a high rise with a cityscape in the background, and this is what it came up with. And
And it looks like they upgraded their TV screens in the back too.
yeah, they did. Yeah, absolutely. A little bit different colored wooden floor, but we're going to play with that for a while and see how well AI does for us. One of the images today and one of the story items, news items, is also AI generated, and I'll just give you a brief excerpt of that.
Mm-hmm.
The Pasadena City Police Department has switched all of their cop cars over to Tesla Model Ys. And of course, it's brand new announcement, and there aren't any pictures of it. So I went to AI and I said, "Give me some Pasadena police cars with Tesla Model Ys,"
Wow.
and it did a pretty good job.
I was fooled. Took a look at that picture
Yeah.
ahead of time and thought, "Oh, that's kind of interesting."
hmm
It didn't even occur to me that would be AI generated.
Yeah, the picture that was in the magazine article was just a picture of a dark, Model Y without any of the lights on it or anything. So
Sure.
this is far more relevant. So I think we're going to lead with an interesting story here before the questions come in. We're kind of intrigued by this lucid marketing strategy where they're taking some of their staff, putting them into a lucid air, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
and driving over to the Tesla superchargers to catch people that are waiting to get a charge and offering them test drives. Love to hear from you guys, by the way. What do you think about that? But your thoughts, Mark?
I think it's absolutely marketing genius. You're sitting there with your charger. You know you're going to be, if you're going to do any kind of like the charging in a Tesla, it's going to be 20, 30 minutes. And then you see this Lucid Air drive up. And I wish I had taken the time to get the photo that was in the article because it says test drive car and then air across the front door.
Okay.
So it's no question what it is. And then they come out and start inviting people to sit in the Lucid for a test drive.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing genius. Not only are you catching people who have already adopted the belief that EVs are a viable transportation strategy. That's one of the things that's one of the biggest hurdles that you have is getting somebody who is used to driving a gasoline vehicle, an ICE vehicle, to believe that EV could be viable.
So this demographic is already sold on the concept, and now we're exploring options.
Exactly.
Perfect.
You've got millions of Tesla customers now because Tesla sold, something like 4.5 million cars. So charging stations are fully populated all throughout the day, and they get to see an alternative.
Right.
And Lucid's getting all kinds of free press because it's a little bit controversial.
Sure. This ranks up there in terms of marketing brilliance with, Tesla's initial strategy of putting their dealership, loosely worded, into high-end malls where the affluent people are going to shop.
Right.
These are luxury cars. How many people will spring for a $100,000 plus car? And so this really ranks up there. What I'm curious about is what is Tesla's reaction to this?
Oh, yeah. Officially, I would love to hear. I haven't. I know that there are, for lack of a better way of saying it, Tesla fanboys in the crowd that have really kind of come out against this and said, well, how dare they, blah, 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 blah.
Right. Yeah.
But, the reality is I'm looking at the electric article, and the top comment is by a person just named Brian S., liked by 86 people, and it says, I 100% would have taken a test drive while one of my Teslas was charging. How is more information or direct experience with a different EV a bad thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an EV fan, not a Tesla fan. Like someone else said, even if you aren't interested, you'll at least have new knowledge to pass on to non-EV owners when they ask about electric vehicles.
Good point.
I think he made a fabulous point there.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you have a captive audience, like you said, at those superchargers. That demographic is precisely how they're going to attract new business.
Sure, absolutely. And I mean, you think about it. Maybe you intended on being at the charger for 20 minutes. With the test drive, you're there for 30. Okay, well, you just got 10 minutes of extra charge on your car.
Right, right. Looks like we have our first question from TikTok. User with 15 digits, numerical digits behind it. He says, what do you guys think about all these electric cars catching fire?
I think that every time an electric car catches fire, it makes the news.
It is a proportion issue, precisely.
It's exactly the same type of thing of every time there's an airplane accident, it makes the news.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, air travel is several orders of magnitude safer than travel in a car. Well, electric vehicle fires make the news because virtually every one of them does. Yet electric vehicles, we've talked about this in the past, they catch fire far less frequently than ICE vehicles.
We actually have a video, folks, out on YouTube that addresses this, and the byline or the headline on the thumbnail is something like, do EVs catch fire more than ICE vehicles, or something like that? And the statistics clearly indicate that EV fires are more of an aberration rather than a norm, that ICE vehicles have a much higher rate of, fire or thermal event incidents, as they call them. And but yeah, it is distorted in the media, and it's because we like sensationalism. We have preconceived expectations about what to expect, and when we hear about an EV fire, it validates some of the basic fears about EVs.
By all means, I do recognize and realize with an ICE vehicle fire, the fire truck pulls up, and anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes later, your fire's out and everybody can go home. Mm-hmm. When an electric vehicle catches fire, I like to make the comparison of a Roman candle. It's like a 6-foot wide by 18-foot long Roman candle, and there's no amount of water in the world that's ever going to truly put that out. You're just going to kind of knock it down because it's a chemical reaction.
A couple of months ago in Scottsdale, there was a Tesla Model X that ran into a building, and it caught fire. And the local news, I think it was Channel 12, contacted us for a opinion because we're in the EV business. And I looked at the images ahead of time before calling them back, and I saw that they put foam all over this car. Well, foam isn't going to do very much in an EV fire because it's designed to reduce oxygen, and reducing oxygen doesn't work with an EV fire because it generates its own oxygen, basically.
Right.
So lots of water, copious amounts of water, cooling down the battery was the correct way to handle it. But the reason this made major headlines, in fact, national headlines, is they thought they put the fire out with foam. They thought everything's hunky-dory. The fire department goes back home, and the tow truck arrives, puts it up on the tow truck. He's driving down Scottsdale Road, gets to a very busy intersection, and the thing ignites again in the middle of the intersection. Now they shut down, a major cross-section there. And but anyway, it definitely made a lot of headlines. That evening, I remember talking to my chiropractor. There were a couple of them in there, and so I was talking about this, and they said, yeah, there's a disproportionate amount of news or, that takes place. The same is true in the business that we're in. If we ever injure a patient or, heaven forbid, kill a patient, it immediately makes global headlines. But do you have any idea how many MDs kill people daily?
Right.
It was kind of harsh, but they had a point there,
Richard, I think you helped put together that video. Do you have some stats for us on that?
I sure do. So what the Bureau of Transportation Statistics and NTSB have to say on the matter is EVs have a 0.3% likelihood of igniting versus a 1.05% likelihood for gas cars. So it is significantly greater for traditional cars.
So it's about 4 times greater for traditional cars. Along that line, on TikTok, another carbon unit has a question for us. What do you think of all the ICE cars catching fire?
Good comeback. Good comeback. Another carbon unit.
Yes.
It looks like Niles is with us from Denmark at the Danish Genome Institute. He says, "Good morning. I find it okay too, as long as they keep their distance and don't walk up and preach. One could maybe argue that it shows a bit of lucid desperation if they resort to that." Of course, he's talking about the earlier stint
Yeah.
that we did about how we think it's an interesting marketing concept to drive a Lucid down to a Tesla supercharger while people are waiting and offer free rides.
By all means. And you're right. There's going to be a number of people who might be put off by it, who might feel like they're getting evangelized as opposed to it getting sold. So that's a good point that he makes.
Mm-hmm.
On YouTube, My Melt says, "I saw some stats out there that there are less injury and deaths in all the EV fires compared to the ICE vehicle fires." I think Richard might be able to speak more to that, but I think that's correct though. When there's roughly 4 times fewer fires, I think there's going to be fewer injuries as well.
Mm-hmm. That
Well,
makes sense.
I don't have the numbers up in front of me, but we can take a look at a previous news article that talked about that car that went off the cliff. I think it was 250 feet high.
Yeah.
Right. It was a Model
in
Y.
California,
Was
yeah.
it? It was some Tesla. And thankfully, everybody was okay. If I took my 1993 Ford F-150 off the side of a cliff, it could be 60 feet and I'd be dead. Most cars are not going to be able to survive something like that, but EVs are.
Yes,
Good point.
good point.
And it didn't catch fire. Did you notice that?
I did.
Of course, when we made that comment in one of the previous podcasts when this event occurred, they said, well, it was in the water, so
Well,
it was
yeah.
extinguishing it. But yeah. Have you ever watched magnesium burn underwater, folks? And that'll give you a clue what these lithium ion fires are like. We've had, unfortunately, 2 of them in our history with Gruber Motor Company. And as sad as it is, the fire departments come and they spray water and they just do that endlessly. What were they pumping? 6,000 gallons per minute into our building.
Yeah.
It was flooding the street. There was a waterfall coming out the front door, and the fires just continued to rage.
Yeah, it was that was a very traumatic experience, honestly. Very sad for when that happened.
So it looks like YouTube, Crunch de Grace Hopper, like number 7, hit that thumb. I'm not sure what.
So they're advocating that people hit the like button on
hit the like.
on YouTube, yeah,
Oh,
or
okay.
TikTok or
Okay.
Facebook or wherever you are. Hit that like button.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Yes, hit
Richard.
that.
Yeah, that one was.
That's a social media insider thing, I think.
Yes, I think so too. My Melt on YouTube says, "Saw some stats out there that there are fewer injury and deaths in all those EV fires compared to the ICE vehicle fires." I can't speak to that as directly. I know that we've talked about frequency. I don't know that we've talked about the injuries, though.
I think in the future, the same correlation will be made with full self-driving as we get human beings uninvolved in the, propulsion of transportation devices. My own personal opinion is machines will be able to do a much better job.
I think so too. On TikTok, MP says, "What you guys are talking about is when you're sitting on top of that much lithium polymer, it's like sitting on top of a ticking time bomb. When lithium polymer burns, you do not have much time."
Good point.
That is a good point, that when it starts to burn, there is not much time, and it may go from showing no signs of burning to on fire very quickly. So that is true that you don't have a lot of time. On TikTok, Dominic Pesagno says, "When is solar charging going to be added to EVs?" You want to take that one on?
Yeah, already is. I suggest looking up a company by the name of Aptera, Aptera. They're in Southern California. They make a 3-wheeler EV, and it has solar panels mounted on top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the only company. I think in one of our previous podcasts, we mentioned 2 others, 2 in Europe, I believe. And we truly believe that this is the future. By the way, getting back to the batteries, how volatile they are, and this DC storage phenomena is a temporary thing in our opinion, because it seems silly to carry a 1,200-pound DC storage method with you when you're traveling somewhere. Eventually, the energy density will get much higher, and the volatility will begin to decrease. And that's already the case with some of these other batteries like LFP,
Yep.
graphene, sodium. I'm not
So
sure.
sodium ion is not flammable.
Okay,
It,
perfect.
it is.
It's table
It-
salt.
yeah, basically it's table salt. It's the combination of the cobalt and some of the other rare metals in that lithium ion electrolyte that is so flammable. So the LFP electrolyte is not as flammable. Solid state batteries, kind of by definition, there is no liquid electrolyte in those. The solid electrolyte, as a result, becomes far less flammable as well.
Mm-hmm.
Frank's Adventure 2022 makes a comment on TikTok. Volkswagen engine fires, they're the same with magnesium.
Yeah, and some of the other wheels to lighten them up were sometimes made out of magnesium as well. So,
Oh, that would be something else to. You're driving, your car catches fire, and the next thing you know, the wheels themselves are on fire. Ooh,
crazy. Yeah.
I don't want to think about that one. And then Niles from the Bion Danish Genome Institute mentions on YouTube, which design improvements do you think of that would make it easier to neutralize EV battery fires? Great question.
Yeah. The first responder training these days for the lithium-ion battery fires is just copious amounts of water, back away, and continue to cool it down. It's, of course, again, a short-lived problem, despite the fact that some of these manufacturers are still investing in lithium mining. Even Tesla the other day in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And then Stellantis, those of you that saw 60 Minutes, there was a stint about the Salton Sea. And Stellantis apparently is investing heavily in doing lithium mining. Lithium is going away. It is not a safe method of storing DC energy.
You know, the lithium, once it gets combined with other elements and salts, those other elements and salts do help make it a lot less flammable than it is right now. It's that lithium mixed in with the cobalt and magnesium that it's that combination that makes it so highly flammable. I know lithium has been a great energy storage method in the past, and I think will continue to be. I think the design changes, really, to answer Niles' question, solid state batteries, the alternative where you end up with lighter batteries. We've talked. There's been articles in Sweden, for example, about they put their first electrified road onto their development map, and within 25 years, they hope to have about 3,000 kilometers of electrified highway. So you won't need a battery necessarily. Right. It'll charge while you're driving. That's where we think it's going to go. You're to your earlier point. The improvements that can be made is that batteries are going to be largely taken out of the equation.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, one of the news items that I collected here over the last week was that NIO's latest filing hints at EVs powered by solid-state batteries. Theirs, of course, coming as early as this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a good electric piece here that I collected. It said that solid-state technology continues to tantalize the EV industry. China might lead in offering commercial solid-state cells in passenger EVs, but their initial performance remains uncertain. They are talking about a 150 kW battery pack that is large and has energy-dense cells that could allow NIO to deliver lighter and more efficient power. And then, of course, we have the Amprius story, which continues to evolve.
Yes. Amprius is making a battery that has 500 watt hours per kilogram of density. Not totally sure what the underlying energy chemistry is. For sure, they're not really disclosing that as far as I know, but that's a big difference as well. And of course, I love to bring up the example that when we were talking with somebody about implementing graphene batteries as a project in cars, they showed us a video where they had this graphene battery at a shooting range and hooked it up to a voltmeter, showed that it was putting out, what was it, 9 volts, I think, or something like that,
Hmm.
and shot it several times. And at the end, it wasn't on fire. It had several holes in it, and it was still putting out about 9 volts of energy.
Right, it was full of bullet holes, yes, which would replicate some of the problems that we have with lithium ion. If you have a puncture, that can often ignite the battery. In fact, one of the first fires I remember when Tesla first came out with the Model S was that very thing, driving down a freeway, pipe floating around, and apparently it punctured the battery.
Ah, okay.
And when they pull off the side of the road, the next thing you know, the car's being consumed in flames. But anyway, it looks like NIO, if successfully introducing that this summer in China, they speculate that these will be imported to Europe. It means that both the Chinese and EU markets might experience solid-state powered EVs before the U.S. Now, just quickly, what is the difference between a solid-state battery and a lithium-ion type battery? It's the difference is that there's a liquid electrolyte solution sandwiched between the cathode and anode. The cathode is the positive post, the anode is the negative post. And the solid-state batteries have a solid electrolyte.
Right. And one of the biggest challenges that scientists have had with this solid electrolyte in the past is the microscopic cracks that appear in that solid electrolyte. The lithium, as it's being charged and discharged, seems to find those cracks, work its way through them, and then it ends up with electrical shorts. But scientists in the labs, earlier this year, we saw articles that said scientists seem to have solved that particular problem. So I'm not terribly surprised to see an auto manufacturer already coming out with early versions of that.
So we're working on a video currently, which will probably be released within the next week or so. And we decided to tackle this whole notion of battery swapping. And one of the main reasons is it's back in the limelight. Fisker apparently within the last couple of days announced that they have partnered with a company. What was the name of the company, Richard?
It's Ample Technologies.
Ample Technologies, okay. Anyway, the whole concept here is rather than drive to a supercharger or to a charging station, you drive into a building that essentially takes the battery out of your car, the main propulsion battery, all 1,200 pounds or whatever, and it swaps it out with another freshly charged battery. The time required, we talked to Kyle Connor this morning, and he mentioned that he was in Norway, and he went through one of these swapping stations with a NIO vehicle, and he said it was about 6 minutes or so to get that battery swapped. He has a video out there, by the way, on his channel called Out of Spec Motoring, which you can see the whole experience there. We watched it carefully as well. It was wintertime. It just looked like a logistics nightmare to drop a 1,200-pound battery, have all the hydraulics and engineering required to do that. Bring another battery underneath the car, mind you. Now that's going to require, some degree of mechanization, and then alignment issues. Plugging that battery back up inside the car. But it definitely worked. Within 6 minutes, they had a 90% charge on the battery again. He's going to join us, by the way, in a few weeks, couple of weeks maybe, in our podcast here, and we'll be able to ask him a bit more about his experience with this battery swapping. But some of the concerns or the issues that we ran into creating this video are, it is definitely back in the limelight with the Fiskers now partnering. NIO has probably the most elegant design for these swapping stations in that instead of doing bricks and mortar, trenching, digging, concrete pads, lots of permit issues, they actually have a modular pod that they're able to crane into position, which serves as the swapping station. They have a one-car pod and a two-car pod.
Interesting.
So that's going to reduce the amount of time involved in creating this type of infrastructure. Um, the other the other thing we noticed is popularity. These things are popular in China or in any dense urban environments. And the reason China is warming up to this notion is they have a lot of apartment dwellers without a lot of charging infrastructure. And they also like full charges for whatever reason. I guess that makes sense because you can go
Yeah,
further, you know?
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So, and you can get a 6 minute, or in 6 minutes, you can have a 90% charge now with this swapping technology. Now, some of the concerns that we saw and are beginning to insert in the video are battery quality. All battery packs initially are basically created equal. It is after their creation that the variables are inserted. So let's say that you have a car, EV, and you have carefully charged this battery pack. You have avoided the the supercharging as much as you can. You charge to 80 to 90%, regularly, and your pack now is and you're in a garage, and a possibly even temperature control garage. All of that helps. All right. So your battery gets swapped out, and the previous owner was somebody that was supplementing their income driving for Uber. They had a earlier Model S free supercharging, and they decided that that's far more attractive than paying for my own electricity at
Of
my
course.
house. So they did nothing but supercharging with this.
Always to 100%, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. So here you are now. You're getting a battery that has infinitely more variables or more wear and tear than the one that you relinquished when you went into the charging station. So that's one concern. And then the battery age tracking. How are they going to do that? We all know that as these main propulsion batteries age, there is some degradation. They become more marginalized than the fresher batteries. So how do you know what you're getting at this charging station? And of course, the worst case scenario is you do a swap, and before you go back to get another swap, your battery dies.
Well, I mean, you think about it. Your car's computer still thinks that you started with a 250-mile battery. You still have a 250-mile battery, but maybe you only have a 210-mile battery.
Yeah, exactly. And then the final thing is lack of standardization in the EV battery world. There isn't a manufacturer on the planet yet that is standardized, so you can swap a BMW i8 to a Tesla. They're all different,
Right.
starting with even Tesla. So let's say that we go with just one brand, Tesla. There are 5 different batteries in the Model S. Anyway, it is a daunting challenge to insert battery swapping into the EV world. And then the final thing is, has anybody noticed that charging times are getting faster and faster?
Yeah.
So at some point in time, we're going to have that tipping point, that crossover point. It's going to be as fast or even faster to do regular charging.
Well, and I love your point about the different battery technologies. Later on, we may, time permitting, talk about the 4680 cells. That's progress. How would you ever swap batteries in a Model Y from a battery that has 4680 cells back to a battery that has 2170? The whole car firmware has to be changed in order to accomplish that.
Right. Daunting challenges.
So there's a lot of challenges there. And in this power space, we were talking before the podcast, Gruber Power Services, our sister company, is specializes in critical power applications. While the chemistry is different, they're lead acid batteries going into UPSs. We've talked in the past about how the similarities between UPSs and cars are, and it really extends to the batteries as well. In one location, you might have a casino that's out in rural America that is regularly having power outages and losses, and so they're hitting that UPS again and again and again while the generator powers up, and they're also keeping that UPS under a fairly high load. Then you've got the typical office building in city urban area. Maybe it only is running at 20% load. So those batteries sit on float. They have good solid utility power coming in. The batteries in that office building might last twice as long as the batteries out in the field in the casino, and they're the same batteries and the same UPS.
Sure. The worst applications for the UPS batteries in traffic lights. They have those boxes that are
Oh
sitting on the
yeah,
posts.
absolutely.
And of course, in the summertime, that box heats up. And you have a UPS battery inside there, and those get fried regularly. But I'm glad you mentioned the UPS angle, because in that industry, in the critical power industry, standardization has already taken place. The
Yes.
batteries inside those cabinets are typically 12 volt, and they have a particular amp hour rating. 12 volt 80 amp hour is a very popular battery. So it allows the aftermarket manufacturers to make batteries to that specification. So if you have Enerdine batteries or C&D batteries in that UPS, you can easily replace it with another brand, like our brand,
Right.
which is Gruber Power Services batteries.
Yes.
I think that level of standardization will eventually have to take place in the EV world as this continues to grow and expand, especially for aftermarket to thrive in
Yeah,
that world.
I agree with you there. I totally think so. Hey, we've got a few more questions. Let's
Sure.
go ahead and get to them. We're going to start with YouTube and Anwar. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because it's in Arabic, and I know I'm going to mispronounce it. It says, "Hi, good morning from Kuwait. I'm Anwar. Mr. Gruber, let me tell you, in Kuwait, we start to see Tesla cars increase, and some malls provide EV chargers and parking now for electric cars."
Well, that's great news, Anwar, and you should probably begin to see some of the Lucid cars popping up there as well. I believe that there is a production facility that is under construction, or at least on the blueprints, for Saudi Arabia, and yeah. What we find is that there's a lot of resistance to electric vehicles initially, because ICE vehicles have been around for a century or more. The acceptance grows rapidly, almost exponentially, once people begin to experience an electric vehicle,
Yeah.
and they begin to see that the air is getting cleaned up. Norway's a prime example.
Oh, it is.
I think the per capita EV ownership there is the highest in the world right now, as far as any country. And feel free to correct me if there's a country that actually has a better distinction than that. But I was surprised that the Germans took so long to warm up to that idea. But again, it's like wildfire now. They are definitely on board with this. And remember, they have some beautiful cars there. They have some great
Yes, they do.
manufacturers. Japan is another one that actually does a great job with building cars.
And I don't think the heat is going to be an issue over time. I realize that Kuwait is in one of the few areas of the world that gets hotter than we do in Arizona. But like Kuwait, Arizona is a desert area, and EVs are incredibly popular. They've proven to be able to stand the test of time, even through the heat that we have here. It's 40 degrees centigrade or higher frequently every summer.
We have a TikTok firefighter chiming in. Whoops, my audio went dead.
Oh, well, we'll
It's
have
probably
to,
my
it's
battery.
probably
All right,
your
never mind.
probably your headphones.
Yeah, I can hear you guys okay.
Go ahead.
So, Frank's Adventure 2022. He says, I was a firefighter. Many wheels were magnesium. You could put thousands of gallons of water on them to put them out. I think the best example of that is if you take a piece of a piece of magnesium, ignite it, and throw it in a lake or throw it underwater, you'll see it just glowing underwater, continuously
Yeah, because
burning.
it's still burning until it burns
It's a
itself
sight to
completely
behold.
out.
Yeah.
It is. It really is. We had one person tell us when it comes to the lithium-ion battery packs, if you really want to do it safe, and your lithium-ion battery pack starts to catch fire, hopefully you have a swimming pool nearby. You can just
Right.
drop it into the swimming pool. By the time it's done burning, the swimming pool will have mostly boiled away, but you'll save your battery and save the area.
I don't know if this is legend or not, but in the early days of Tesla, when there was no Model S yet or any other vehicles other than the Roadster, legend has it that as they were experimenting with that 1,000-pound cube battery pack in a Tesla Roadster, they suspended one of these above a vat of water as a precaution. So again, if
Wouldn't
those
be
of you
surprised.
watching, we'd love to hear that story and corroborate that.
Niles from the Biodanish Genome Institute has another question for us today. How high do you think battery densities will be eventually, and why?
Well, this is typically where Jesse chimes in and talks about fusion energy and unlimited power source. Um, currently, I guess you could chart that. You can take a look at the progression over the last few years and, do some predictive analysis based on that.
I think so. In in the past, your typical alkaline battery runs anywhere from 30 to 60 watt hours per kilogram worth of energy. At the other extreme end of that, the most efficient fuels that we know of today, gasoline, diesel, probably diesel with the high sulfur content is the most efficient um, energy source, and it runs somewhere, I believe, around 13 or 14,000 watts, watt hours equivalent per kilogram of energy. Um, will batteries ever achieve that? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely see batteries getting up to the 1,000 watt hour per kilogram space. I'm not sure if I would ever see them get much above that, but then again, being a tech guy and watching what's happened in computers over the last 30 years, I'm never going to say never.
That's a good point. Good point. YouTube, Heinrich and Connected Health Training. Welcome, Heinrich. He says, hello, gentlemen. The battery swapping is only available if you are leasing a battery from Neo. Thank
Okay.
you for that additional tip. We're going to have to insert that into the video or do some research with that. So it's only for leasing. And I'm assuming that with that program, there may be some more controls that are available. So you're not just simply going to get a crazy battery. And the responsibility for a failed battery may pass on to whoever is providing that service. That
Yeah,
makes sense
I
now.
think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I still think back to though the whole propane exchange thing.
Yeah.
You go to Blue Rhino, that's one of the brands here in Phoenix, and you give them your tank, and you get their tank, and they like you to keep their tanks, but you're every once in a while you're going to give them that 15-year-old tank that's been recertified twice and really is good for a little more than target practice.
Right.
And you're going to pick up one of their 1-year-old tanks and say, well, I got a tank out of it.
And that probably happens more at the self-service stations than it does in the places where you actually have to exchange it with a human
Oh,
involved.
yeah, probably. And yet, if you look at the prices, you find that their pricing for a full exchange tank is only slightly less than the price of buying a brand new tank from Costco and then going and getting it filled.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so you're basically buying a new tank every time.
Right.
Stig 770 on YouTube has a couple questions for us. We'll get to them separately here. It says, hey guys, good morning. Please talk about protection systems to prevent batteries catching fire.
Well, I know that Tesla. I'm going to take these off because the batteries are shot now. But what Tesla did was, as their product evolved with the Model S, they ended up putting a blanket on top of the battery to we're assuming to reduce some of the effects of a fire, and it was an asbestos. It looked like asbestos blanket or some sort of a heat resistant, encapsulated in a plastic pocket, basically. Inside the battery pack, they have mica sheets above and below. It's a tough question because the once magnesium or lithium ion begins to ignite, there isn't a lot you can do to control it.
Right.
It will burn through steel eventually, for example, because of the intense continuous heat. I think the best long-term solution is going to be getting rid of lithium ion and moving to some of these newer technologies, different chemistries, and eventually getting rid of the whole notion of carrying DC storage around with you.
Yeah, I think so too. I know today, in today's world, it's less well known than you would think, but Teslas have a radiator and a cooling system.
Mm-hmm.
I know your Model S has a particular type of coolant. It goes through the battery. There are equivalent to water pumps in it. Between that, there are potting compounds. things of that sort to help keep the cells both separated from one another should anything bad happen. And those potting compounds are typically kind of like a thermal paste type of compound.
Right.
They absorb heat and dissipate it very quickly. So those are some things that are in place today on protection systems on Teslas to help reduce and eliminate the chance for batteries to catch fire.
So from YouTube, Crunch to Grace Hopper asks, why do battery electric vehicles catch fire? Well, there are a number of reasons. Overcharging, definitely. That's why the manufacturers go to such great lengths to insert sophisticated electronics that monitor voltage level, current levels, and firmware that keeps an eye continuously on how the batteries are performing and behaving during charge. So the other reason is collision, damage, punctures, which will essentially short the cells, which creates intense heat, and then they ignite. Another one that came to light just recently, a few months ago during hurricane season here in the U.S., we had Hurricane Ian, and it was creating a lot of backwater, salt water essentially getting into the land areas. And there was a Tesla that was submerged partially in salt water. And normally the cars, the Teslas, are impervious to any kind of water ingress, but it's not a perfect science.
Right.
In this particular case, salt water got inside the battery pack, and salt water is fundamentally a liquid conductor. And as that occurred, you started to get current flows. You got batteries that were overheating. The firmware couldn't do anything about it because it wasn't controlling any charging or discharge. And those cars caught fire as well. So it's a number of reasons. He continues with the question. He says, why didn't that 250-foot cliff dive Tesla not ignite? Well, it could have been a number of reasons. The rocks down below may not have affected the battery because it flipped on its top or on its side. What failure scenarios, he asks, can result in fires? Well, definitely puncture, the ones that we just mentioned. Can the BMSs, the battery management systems, be programmed to isolate battery sections to limit fire spread? We get asked this question often. They actually do have some telemetry that is provided by the architecture of the battery. The cell or the main batteries are separated into modules. There's 16 modules in an 85 kW Model S, for example. The modules are separated into bricks. The bricks are a collection of parallel connected 18650 cells in a Model S. The level of monitoring the firmware is able to do is to brick level only, because if it was to do cell level, you would have over 7,000 connecting points that you would have to monitor, and now your electronics and firmware needs have just exponentially increased. So that's the problem with the being able to shut things down in the car if it's sensing any sort of problem.
We know that BMSs and Roadsters, for example, will limit the charging level on a battery, and eventually that's what's the resistive cell or the parasitic cell issue is on those Roadster batteries. The whole idea is that if a battery brick that has a parasitic cell continues to take charge, that parasitic cell is actually just has become a resistor and is just giving out more and more heat.
It's a load, basically.
It's basically a load on that battery. Yeah. So it tries to drain, you charge it, the drain turns into heat. Eventually the battery can't dissipate the amount of heat that it's generating, and then it goes into what's called thermal runaway. These BMSs are really well designed to help prevent that thermal runaway by only charging batteries to the level that the lowest brick can get to.
Right. By the way, we have a quick update for you. We have a Roadster that's coming in from Florida, being picked up right now, actually, and it is a resistive cell Roadster. In a nutshell, what's happening is 1 out of 6,831 cells in that car has gone rogue. It's resistive, it's parasitic. So it's draining a brick of 69 cells and beginning to kill the ability to charge the car. And this is probably the most volatile or most rampant decline that we've seen, in that it started at 170 miles range. The customer noticed it was only charging to 103 miles a few days ago. It then dropped to 90 miles, 70 miles, 50 miles yesterday, and this morning she was telling me that it was 32 miles.
Oh, goodness.
So at this point, it will arrive here bricked.
Yep.
But again, it tells us that, there's a certain architecture within these battery packs. It's comprised of sheets or modules, and then bricks, and then individual cells. And the monitoring that the firmware is able to do is only to the brick level. There are 99 bricks in a Roadster, and I forget how many in a Model S.
I believe it's 70. There's 6
70
bricks.
something.
6 bricks times 16 would be 72.
Okay. Hope that answers your question, sir.
On YouTube, Nay2 Gas, comment for us. I wish I could swap out my 2012 Nissan Leaf battery with a Tesla Model S. I'm sure. He says, then I get the 200 plus mile range instead of only 24 miles because my Leaf battery is so degraded. Oh, goodness, 24 miles.
Well, we're all hoping for standardization in the EV world, and batteries, as long as they're still around, definitely would make sense.
Definitely. From Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod is coming to us from Thunder Bay in Canada.
Welcome.
Welcome, and regular contributor. He says, hello from Thunder Bay, 33 degrees centigrade today. Now, 33 degrees centigrade is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's definitely summertime up there. Then on YouTube, Alex asks a question. Has Gruber MC done any Model 3/Y repairs at this point in time? Well, yeah, Gruber Motor Company has.
Yeah. The way to answer that question is, we typically do not see in-warranty cars. So there's a certain age group that tend to visit our Gruber Motor Company service center. However, when the customer requests some aftermarket type work, which Tesla will not do, suspension upgrades, for example, then we do get involved. Some of the things like the frunk automatic opening devices that they have, installation of those, audio upgrades, even some tire work from time to time. So we do see the other platform vehicles, just not as frequently as the Tesla Roadster or the Tesla Model S.
I know that we're looking forward to starting to see the Model 3s coming in when they start coming off a warranty. The mechanical portions of those Model 3s will be coming off a warranty, actually starting around the end of this year, beginning of next year. They had a 5-year warranty, and they started to be produced back in 2018. And then the batteries are typically about 8 years on warranty, so we've got a few more years for that.
Mm-hmm. And we're also getting interest from some of the other EV manufacturers that realize they're going to have a difficult time scaling their service delivery. So they're beginning to look at outsourcing some of the warranty work and some of the maintenance for their vehicles. And shops like ours that are skilled at repairing electric vehicles, it's not too hard of a transition for us to move into a different vehicle platform.
By all means. Lightning Rod on YouTube follows up with a question. He'd like to hear our thoughts on Elon Musk's recent tweet. He replied to, in his words, a clown, that claimed that climate change is a scam. Mr. Musk replied that it's overblown, but he says, my interest in electrification is secondary to environmental collapse. I can assure you things are far worse than being reported. How do I reconcile these statements?
It's a tough question. I know he says, feel free to skip. My answer to that is I've been on the planet for some time now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned somewhere along the way that you really can't ignore facts. So that's where I would place my answer for that question. Sometimes we have phenomena that we can't explain, like why are there more storms? Why are there more droughts? Why are there more brush fires? Why is the wine growing region suddenly up north in England rather than the south of France
Right.
anymore? Why why are the coastal cities beginning to see higher water levels,
Hmm.
and you can pretty much do a cause effect explanation for those, and it doesn't take too much. It's not much of a stretch to attribute it to something like climate change, too much CO2 in the air. We are releasing too much carbon, and we need to get fossil fuel burners off the road. You take a look at the statistics, how much are they spewing and what effect does that have?
Well, I lived in Alaska for a few years when I was growing up, and I still have family that lives up there. Th- Looking at climate change would be taking and doing nothing more than going to Portage Lake. That's an area that's a little, probably 2 hours south of Anchorage. It's an easy drive. It used to be there's a glacier at the far end of the lake, and they have pictures there of this glacier. In the 1910s, the glacier was all the way up to the lodge on the close side of the lake.
Mm-hmm.
In 1950, the glacier was 100 or so feet back. Between 1950 and 2000, the glacier continued to retreat. It was maybe halfway back from where the lake is. Now you pretty much have to get a pair of binoculars and look off in the far distance and see this glacier that is almost completely melted now.
That analogy, for some reason, reminded me of my hairline. It has been receding almost at the same rate.
Yes, yes. So,
But
uh,
I know what you're saying. There are alarmists that oftentimes distort what's going on.
yeah.
And but there is ample evidence to indicate that something's up, and it's not too much of a stretch to attribute it to things like global warming. So that's my opinion, our opinion, I
I
guess.
think it's my opinion as well. The last article I had read about Norway and being one of the leaders in adoption of electric vehicles, um, Oslo, now that they have about 80% adoption rate. They have done environmental measurements of the pollution in their air, and they found that vehicle emissions, pollution that could be attributed to vehicle emissions, is down about 30% in Oslo.
Hmm.
And the cause effect is there. They say, well, 4 out of 5 people either have or are buying electric vehicles. Um, it's so the naysayers that say, well, electric vehicle emissions really aren't the cause. Well, they are one of the big causes.
Yeah. The term that scares me the most is tipping point and irreversible. If we're really at a point where we can't contain this anymore, then really all bets are off, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be you and I. It's going to be our great grandchildren that are going to
Yeah.
be affected by this.
Yeah. It's going to be my granddaughter Isla and her granddaughters beyond her.
Right.
So on YouTube again, Stig770 says, nice explanation of battery design and connectivity. That means security, and a controller must be in a battery brick.
Definitely, yes,
Yes.
yes. Each of the modules, battery sheets and battery modules, usually a collection of a number of cells, has a microprocessor controller, and it does a pretty good job of doing the safety, of the monitoring and the maintenance of those cells.
Yep. Niles at the Bion Danish Genome Institute asks another good question. He usually does. He says, how about inviting Jordan I don't know
Gasige, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, to the show. His YouTube channel is The Limiting Factor, and he might be able to make quite precise guesses about future batteries. Thank you for those tips. We have finally gotten large enough to where we can attract this type of talent. It
Yeah.
used to be when we had, 500 subscribers, no one would give us the time of day. We weren't relevant enough. But we're enjoying this new level of prestige. We're certainly not at Elon's level at this point, or Rich
Oh, yeah.
Rebels with millions of followers or 1 million followers or
Well,
whatever he
even
has.
Sandy Monroe at 300,000 followers is somebody we look up to right now.
Yeah, definitely. But we enjoy having guests to round out our show. We'll have some new ones coming up, actually, including Kyle Connor, who we spoke about this morning. So stay tuned. It's always good to get a different viewpoint on things. And of course, everybody brings their own experiences.
By all means. So, what I can absolutely guarantee you is that I will be watching The Limiting Factor coming up.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, we're at 1 hour.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
TikTok user with a bunch of numbers behind him, and he makes a good point here. He says, AI robot Tesla mechanics. It's not far-fetched. Wasn't it just recently that Tesla showed a robot that was working on another robot's knee or arm or something?
Oh, yeah.
And that was really a paradigm shift if you think about it, because we're used to, thinking that humans are creating these machines. And the whole notion of machines repairing themselves and creating themselves is a real mind blower, really. It's very threatening to humans if you think about it.
Well, and that was part of the Investor Day. That was one of their videos. It was two robots working to build a third robot, and then that 5-minute video ended with a family portrait of 3 robots in a hallway.
Grandfather robot on the wall.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So,
It's coming, folks. I guess we agree.
yeah, it's coming.
So TikTok, Jerry Engine. Welcome, Jerry. He says, I am interested in a Model S 2016. How will battery degradation affect the range over time? Well, getting back to this Tesla Roadster, this particular owner in Florida was charging to about 170 miles, and your typical range decline over a year's period of time on those multi-cell lithium-ion packs should be about maybe 1 to 2, maybe 3 miles per year.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite average. When you have a resistive cell that the firmware now is saying, you're dangerous, we're not going to charge any higher than where your brick is, the decline becomes rapid, and that's your clue that there's something wrong with that battery. It's kind of a gamble when you buy an older EV, because you really, it's difficult to determine the condition of the battery. And by the way, there's another, again, business opportunity for those of you listening that want to get into the business of creating a battery measuring device, electronics, or whatever. I think that's going to be big business, because if people were able to put a device onto an EV that gives them a lot of information about the health of that battery, testing different parameters, you could make a much more informed decision as to whether to buy that car or not.
I could see it right now. Somebody has a device that allows you to plug into the charge port of a car, because that charge port is an electrical connection straight to that battery, as well as a data connection to the internal CAN bus of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And they could then from there read detailed information on the battery. I could totally see that coming.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the prices of the used BEVs are very attractive at times. You can pick up a early generation Model S for $25,000 to $30,000.
Right. I think my advice for you, Jerry, is on the 2016 Model S, take a look at the miles.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we have seen in our experience, both in repairing EVs, in people who have come to us on our podcast, and the EVs, the electric vehicles we've driven, is that mileage is the limiting factor on the batteries, even more than time.
Mm-hmm.
On the electronics, it's the opposite. It's time over mileage. A capacitor is going to last 7 to 10 years, whether you have 5,000 or 500,000 miles on a battery. But you're right that degradation in the Model S's is not it's fairly negligible, honestly.
Yeah. My other advice to anyone wanting to buy a battery electric vehicle or any EV, or any car for that matter, is I always encourage people, stay away from the dealers. First of all, you're going to have to pay tax.
Yeah.
Buy from a private owner. There are a number of advantages. One is you can negotiate, and they're not going to be as hardcore as a dealer. The price is the price, and we're going to have to go sit in the manager's office and let's play a deal for the next 3 hours, and you're going, I'm done with that. But anyway, buy from a private owner. In most states, you avoid the big tax hit. But the best part about that is you can get the backstory. You can go to their house. You can see how they live. You can see how they take care of their stuff. And of course, you get a sense for, are they telling you a straight story? What you're looking for, of course, is why are they selling it? That's a critical question. And again, all of those other parameters. So that would be my advice to anybody buying a used car is private,
Yeah,
private
excellent
sales.
advice. Excellent advice. Scott Gruber on YouTube. Great last name, by the way.
Yeah.
Have you heard of mobile charging services, and do you think this service is needed?
Under the right conditions, it's very much needed. Or you get a tow truck. I think AAA for a while, or maybe still is, was offering mobile charging services. I don't think it's going to be a big money generator for anybody because there's so many charging stations being built as we speak, actually. And just think back over the last even 5 years, the proliferation, they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere now. They're in shopping centers. They're in hotels. They're in sometimes public installations, facilities. So is it needed? Yes. Under the right conditions, is it a viable business opportunity? Probably not.
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about in the past how there are around 150,000 gas stations in the country. Most of those gas stations are going to have 4 or more fuel pumps. So you extrapolate that out, you're over 500,000 points at which you could fuel your ICE vehicle. We're already past the 100,000 installations in electric vehicle charging stations, and that's, I think, going to be another up to $500,000 or $600,000 just based on the federal mandate within just a couple of years. So you're right, there is business opportunity, but I don't think it's going to be long term. I think it's going to be much more niche than that.
We have a question from TikTok. I abate 119, and I chose to answer this one because he asks, I have a 2014 Ram 1500 with a Hemi engine. Will the electric trucks have the same power as the Hemi? Well, I owned a Mopar as well. In fact, a number of them, from a 68 Dodge Charger, 69 Plymouth Roadrunner, and finally I got a 2008 ACR Viper. And, I'm embarrassed to say, as vicious and brutal as those cars were, and as much noise as they made, and as much, excellence on the track, my P90D Ludicrous 4-door grocery getter sedan would have smoked any one of those 4. There just is no comparison to an electric vehicle, a 3-phase AC induction motor, especially a all-wheel drive with traction control. And the final thing is your horsepower and your torque is there at 0 RPM with an electric vehicle, and that's what makes these things so fast off the line.
Yeah, the diesel is famous for having great torque at low RPMs, much more than gasoline as far as engines go. But I think electric is even better torque than that, because it has instant torque. From the instant that motor engages, you have full torque available to you. I know that Ford has been struggling a little bit with range on their electric vehicles, but it's because I think they kind of underestimated the amount of power that was going to be required over time to tow. It's not a matter of whether it can tow or not. It's got great towing power. When Dodge comes out, they've already announced their Ram Revolution. I think that that Ram Revolution's the extended range is gonna have over 500 miles on its battery, and it will also have that same kind of torque. They're talking about it being able to pull 14,000 pounds. Cybertruck, same type of thing. So short answer to me, I think electric trucks are going to have the same power as the Hemi, if not even better. Aaron owns a Ford F-250, so I wonder what he thinks of that one.
Yeah, so I own the 6.0 Ford diesel, and my prediction is in 5 years it will not make any sense for me to buy a new diesel or a new gas truck. So that's my bold prediction.
Interesting.
And if it doesn't happen in 5 years, just add another 5 years to that.
Okay.
But I think that's a good point, Aaron.
YouTube, never mind, says, thanks, I have a question. In the Middle East in summer, heat reaches 50 degrees centigrade. What is that in Fahrenheit, guys? He's going to look it up.
I'm gonna do the quick.
That's
check.
hot. Yeah, I think Phoenix gets there, but So anyway, continuing with the question, how EV cars are safe, or how practical or safe are EV cars? And I'm assuming in this temperature. Tesla, Lucid, we notice the range drops in hybrid cars in the summer. The same case with EVs, he's asking. What is that temperature?
It's 126
126. Okay.
Fahrenheit. So it's a very good question. One that we can actually answer with some authority, because I know that both you and I have driven in electric vehicles in temperatures here in Phoenix that range anywhere from 115 to 120 degrees.
Right.
And the biggest limiting factor is the charging slows down, because when you're driving forward, the cooling systems on an electric vehicle are similar to the cooling systems on an ICE vehicle. They require that inflow of air in order to cool down. The battery itself, though, can run just fine upwards of 140 degrees, which is, if you guys can do the conversion for me, I think it's somewhere around 65 degrees centigrade, and still run just fine. They're going to lose range. There's no question about that, but they are completely safe to run at those type of temperatures. So if your ambient temperature is running 50 degrees centigrade, which I was corrected is 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
122. Okay.
Then you're going to be able to run just fine in that car. You might lose a little range. You'll find that your charging is slower because the battery systems have to continually work to keep the battery cool, and they don't have the benefit of air coming at the car at 30 or 40 miles an hour.
Right. You know, the hottest it ever got here in Phoenix, never mind, since I've lived here anyway, and I think all-time record was 122 degrees, and they actually ended up shutting Sky Harbor Airport down because the instrumentation in the planes was unable to integrate that kind of heat. And because of safety issues, we were grounded that day, I believe.
Yeah, at the time, the tables that had the mathematical formulas for takeoff and landing only went to 120 degrees.
Okay.
And so they honestly could not say it's going to take X number of feet on the runway to take off. And since they didn't know how long it would take, they had to shut it down.
Right. Yeah, the runway may not have been long enough. But yeah, the other thing that you run into is with an electric vehicle is there is thermal management that is taking place all the time, keeping the battery within a certain temperature range. And what you'll find when you get these extreme temperatures is that your range will nosedive faster than during the ideal temperature ranges. So if you're going to take a trip somewhere and you've got your Tesla Model S fully charged to 240 miles or whatever, and you're going to be gone 2 weeks, you better make sure that you get the car charged, because it may eat into that 240-mile range while you're gone for those 2 weeks if it's that hot.
You know, I've mentioned this story before. A few years ago, I had just gotten my Gruber Model S. My wife and I went on vacation to Catalina Island, and two things happened on that trip that I did not expect. First, when we left for the island, the car was at 49 miles. When we got back from the island 3 days later, the car was at 16. I was kind of freaking out because I had no idea where the chargers were, and it was Los Angeles, so it was within 15 miles, not a problem. The second one was coming back. It was 118 degrees that day. We figured, we'll stop at Quartzsite. We'll, drop in for a quick charge and get it up to 200 miles. We had 75 miles on the car at the time. It slow charged. It was only charging at 7 kilowatts, and that was because the ambient air temperature was 118 degrees. So we went to, I think it was Carl's Jr., and sat in there and had a drink and had an ice cream and came back an hour later, and we had picked up about 35, 40 miles on our charge. It was enough to get us to the next charging station downstream. In this case was in Buckeye. And we were surprised, though, that because of the heat, the charging was going so slowly because it was a supercharger. We figured, stop 15, 20 minutes and be on our way.
Right. So, we've got lots more questions coming in. What we're going to do, I think, at this point is Save those. We'll do them Tuesday next week.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people that are interested in any reports regarding those 3 0-mile roadsters in sea containers in China.
Right. Yes.
The bid, by the way, for those 3 currently is up to $750,000, so $250,000 apiece.
Mm-hmm.
And the pictures that were going to come our way earlier this week did not materialize yet, but I spoke to the sellers this morning, and they're probably in my email already. So there will be, as they said, much higher quality pictures available, and we will post those immediately on the listing, in the listing. The other good news was these 3 cars do have MCOs. And I asked Mark, tell us what an MCO is.
Well, an MCO, very simply put, is a manufacturer's certificate of origin. Before a car is registered for the first time, it does not have a title. It has only the manufacturer's certificate of origin. That effectively is the legal document that says you own a car.
Okay. You had also speculated that there may be some tax advantages with an MCO being available like this.
That's right. The MCO typically will put down what the MSRP price was, or the price at which a vehicle sold. I saw this actually with a trailer. Got a trailer. It only had an MCO. Took it in here in Arizona. They said, "Oh, well, I don't care that you only paid $200 for the trailer. Your MCO says that you got it for $2,100. So you're going to have to pay sales tax on $2,100 because it's not titled."
Gotcha.
Well, the same thing is going to happen, except in a positive for these cars in all likelihood, depending on the state that you're in. If that state charges sales tax, and if you choose to title the car, because that's always an option too, we'll get to in a second. Your state Department of Motor Vehicles is going to charge you sales tax on the purchase price of the car, as stated on the MCO.
Right.
So right now we have bids for $250,000. These cars new probably sold for somewhere between $140,000 and $160,000. The whatever taxes need to be paid will be paid on that $140,000 to $160,000.
Right.
If you choose to not title the car, then you might, depending on the state, you might be able to just get away with saying, "Oh, that's a private party sale, and I'm going to keep the car parked, so I'm not going to pay sales tax since I'm never going to title the car."
It's becoming garage furniture, and yeah.
Exactly. And most of the time, your state motor vehicle department will take that certificate of origin and exchange it for a title.
So you have to relinquish it at that time.
Right.
And what would preserve the value of these cars is keeping the cars with the MCOs.
In all likelihood, that's exactly right.
Interesting. Okay.
Mark, do you know if there's any legislation against just giving the DMV a photocopy of that MCO?
That depends on the state itself. It's not completely unheard of. I have heard of that happening before. I believe we had a Roadster come through our Tesla Roadster selling service where the owner had an Elon Musk signed MCO along with the title for the car. So yes, I think it's possible, but typically the state wants to see and keep the original copy.
So the strategy at this point with these 3 cars is they are going to eventually be swapped into different sea containers. They will most likely come back here. They'll come to Phoenix. We'll do a technical review. We're still on the fence, seriously on the fence, as to whether these original batteries are any good. And even if they are, I mean, what difference does it make?
Right,
Having
right.
an operational car that you're never going to drive. So the other thing is we offer a free escrow service with our Roadster matchmaking site. And people ask all the time, well, how do you make money on this? Well, we don't. It's completely free to the Tesla Roadster community. Once we branch into other cars, which I think is eventually where this matchmaking service is going to evolve, we're going to have to charge because there's a lot of staff involved in handling this. But in the meantime, for the Roadsters, this is completely free. The escrow service is free. All the technical support we provide is free. All the promotion is free. And honestly, we're having fun with this. we're very much committed to making sure that these cars get into the proper environment. And our first choice, my first choice, is they need to be on display. They need to be enjoyed. This is Tesla's first car. It is the type of cars that the Tesla early adopters purchased, and these are very rare and should be appreciated. So.
I mean, I think this is likely the first mass-produced electric vehicle in existence outside of the early 1900s models.
So we'll keep you updated. Those of you interested, check out the Roadster matchmaking site. It's on our Gruber Motors website, and there's a tab that says Roadsters for sale. And the first one up there right now are those 3 zero-mile Roadsters in China.
Now, Alex, Supercat, and Crunch, Grace Hopper, please come back to us this next Tuesday. We will open our podcast to answer the questions that you have for us. We do appreciate you taking time to join us and ask those questions as well.
So it sounds like we've got a wrap.
I think we've got a wrap for now. We will be here same time this next Tuesday. We have the Roadster Roundtable podcast now at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on Wednesdays. And then, of course, same podcast here, same time next week.
Oh, and we forgot. We've got good news for the TikTok audience. We're actually beginning to resolve some of the production issues. And if things go well, next week, Tuesday, at the Next EV podcast, you will be able to see the green screen image behind us, whatever that is for that day.
Yes, it's not a guarantee, but we do think we're solving it. We believe we have solved the issue for the Zoom calls, whether we have video or not, because video and sound are two different technical issues. We think we have the sound solved, and we're doing some final testing on that.
And as always, thank you for joining us. We're having fun. We hope you're having fun, and we'll see you Tuesday next week.
Take care.